Hello, welcome back to my YouTube channel on this not particularly sunny summer's day, but I'm outside nonetheless because I'm probably going to be making a mess with these. As you can see, these are already painted. This is how I picked them up, but it's not the best paint job I've ever seen, and the paint is literally just scratching off with my thumbnail. So I'm going to be stripping them and I'm going to take you along with me. So as you can see a little bit closer up, these have been painted. I have no idea what the paint is on here. All I know is that it's scratching off with my thumbnail, so it's probably been very poorly prepped underneath. These are solid pine and there's a pair of them. They're very, very lovely pieces. You know how much I love pine. They've got really nice proportions, they're a good size, and there's a matching pair, which is always a bonus when you come in to sell nightstands or bedside tables. So I picked these up for £22 for the pair in my local charity shop. I very, very rarely buy things that are already painted because you never know what you're going to get underneath here. But the fact that these are solid pine, I think I'll be fine. The only thing that I found is that on that drawer, I think it's been cracked and there's been a repair job on it. Maybe not, it could just be a big split in the wood. I don't know, until I've stripped it, I don't know. And that is always the problem with buying something that's previously painted. You don't know what lurks beneath. Usually solid wood is a better bet than something veneer or laminate, because there could be some terrible repair jobs done to that laminate or veneer underneath, and you wouldn't know until you strip the paint off. Also, you never know the prep work that's been done to previously painted pieces, so unless you've done the prep work and you've painted the piece, I would personally always advise to strip off any paint that you might inherit, because I've got a feeling that this paint has been applied over the top of a waxed pine finish, which is why the paint's just scraping off with my nail, because obviously water-based paint will not stick over a wax finish. So that's what I've got to strip off. I'm going to try a few different things, a few different ways of stripping it off, because obviously there's quite a bit of detail here. They've also gone over the original handles and the original hinges, so I've got to strip all that off as well. So the first part of this video is me taking the paint off something that's already been painted. So the tool I'm going to start with is a scraper, and these are very sharp. It's a carbide scraper, so the blade is very strong, and the blade is also replaceable. You can get these on Amazon, and the replacement blades as well. They're dead easy to replace. You just undo that screw, put the new blade in, and away you go. And they're very sharp, so I'm going to start with this, because if I can get the majority off with this, it's going to save me messing about with chemical strippers and all that. So it's generally the first thing that I start with is one of these. Not always, but it depends on the piece. There's a lot of flat surfaces on here, a little bit of detail, but I can always go in with it like a stripper at a later date. So I'm going to see how easy the paint comes off with my scraper. So can you see how easy that's coming off this piece? That blade is incredibly sharp, but I'm hardly putting any pressure on at all. If these bedsides were prepped, it would be a little bit harder for the paint to come off. It'd be more kind of soaked in, if you know what I mean, into the grain. But I think what's happened here is that someone's painted straight over a wax finish. And if you don't want to make that mistake, I will link a video now of showing you how to remove wax from a piece of furniture before you paint to avoid this problem. A couple of tips when you are using a scraper to remove the paint. Try and keep the blade as flat as possible so that you don't gouge out any big chunks of the wood. Pine is a soft wood, so you do have to be careful, and that's why I always lie my furniture down flat so that I can get a nice even distribution on the blade. Also, I always try and work with the direction of the grain. Again, that stops you from making any big sort of gouge marks in the wood. So that's the majority of it off this flat side. There is a little bit of detail here, which I'm probably going to get a wire brush or maybe some chemical stripper on, but I'll deal with that later. And what I always do is flip it over so that I'm working down when I'm scraping, because I find that you can get the best power doing it that way with the scraper. So I'm literally just going to concentrate on all of the flat areas of this. I'm not going to do anything with the detail or the paneling or the curved edges or anything like that at all. I'm just doing the flat areas, and you can get different size blades within this range. I've got 3 in total. This is the largest one that I'm currently using. This bottom bit here is actually really hard to get the paint off, so that indicates to me that the wax had probably worn off here. The difference between the adhesion of the paint where it's gone over a wax surface versus where the wax was either taken off or rubbed off or worn off is unbelievable. I cannot stress to you enough how important it is to take wax off a piece before you paint it. The only downside about using these blades is that they do make a rather horrible noise when you are scraping the paint or the finish off the surface of the wood. So I am trying to mute the majority of that noise, and I'll just do a voiceover or play some music over the top of it, because I'm not going to make you endure that. I'm very grateful to the person for not painting inside this piece. This is completely untreated raw pine, which is good. We're going to leave it that way. We're not going to paint it. I'm just going to sand it and clean it, sand it, and we're fine. So that's good news. There is a little bit of paint in the inside here, which I'm assuming it wasn't waxed in here, because normally when people wax furniture or when things are waxed as a factory finish, it's only the exterior. You don't tend to wax in here, so that's probably gonna, yeah, that's gonna be harder to get off. I'll get the majority off with my scraper, and then I'll probably go in with some sandpaper just to get the last bits off. So for that inner bit, there was quite a few drips in there as well, so I'm just going to get the worst of it off with the blade, and then, like I say, I'll just go in with sandpaper or something at a later date to remove the rest. So I was right, there is a crack all the way across here. It hasn't gone through to the sides, or it's not all split all the way on the inside. It's just started to rain, that's good timing. So I will... It's structurally sound, so we just need to disguise that crack, because obviously if we don't fill it and sand it, I say we, why do you want to say in we? I mean me. If I don't fill that and sand it, it's going to be visible again through the paint that I apply on here. So I just need to make sure that that is prepped properly, but I'll do that later, because I'm going to have to quickly get the washing in and move everything inside, because it's gone very grey and it's definitely starting to rain. Always prioritise your furniture before the washing. Get the furniture in first, washing in later. That's one in, safe and dry. That's 2 in, tucked away in the dry. Right, gonna get the washing in and I'll be back. So all the flat surfaces have been stripped with my carbide scraper as best as I can. The top was a little bit more tricky, but I think the wax has been taken off the top. The rest of it just came off. We saw how easy it was coming off with my scraper. So the next thing I've got to tackle is all the details. So there's obviously a trim here. There is some kind of like a panel detail. God, that bird's so loud, isn't it? A panel detail around here, and then there's the trim that goes around the bottom as well. And on each side there's like this kind of recessed kind of trim bit, and inside it's like a curved bit of trim. A little bit awkward, but because this has been painted straight over the top of wax, what I'm hoping will happen is I'll be able to get this off with white spirits and wire wool, because what it'll do is it'll start to lift the wax underneath the paint and it can get it up that way. So I've got some wire wool, and this is one of the kind of it's not a very fine wire wool grade. I don't know what it is because I've lost the packet for it, but it's quite a rough one. And I'm just going to get a load of white spirits. Whoa, that was quite a lot of white spirits on here, and just start to rub away. And yeah, the white spirits is dissolving the paint and the wax underneath, and just lifting the whole lot off. On the other bedside, which you might see on my Facebook and Instagram, I did put paint stripper on, and it just left it in a horrible kind of gloopy mess. So I'm not going to put paint stripper on this. I'm just going to go straight in with the white spirits and the wire wool. And then when I just work in small sections when I'm working with white spirits, because it does evaporate really quickly. So once everything has kind of lifted from there, from that one section that I've just been doing, just got a little bit of stubborn paint there, but once it's all lifted, it's obviously now in like a liquid state, so I need to get a rag and just wipe that off before it dries. Should have brought these out with me, but I didn't. These are the rags. I'm just going to get one. They're all cut up already, and then I'm just going to wipe it off before it has a chance to dry and soak into the wood grain. Yeah, that works loads better than the paint stripper. So you don't always have to use chemical strippers when you're stripping wood. This technique is actually going to be right fine for this particular piece. I have used chemical strippers in the past, but I never seem to get on with them very well. I always end up in a lot of mess, and I know I've made a lot of mess now. The floor's covered in white, in blue shavings from the paint that I've taken off with the scraper. But I can just sweep that up, or I have been known to bring my hoover outside and hoover the deck in. I do look slightly mental, but it gets the job done. But I'd rather the dusty mess, well, it's not even dusty, but I'd prefer that mess than the gloopy mess that I got into with the other bedside when I used the chemical stripper. It's just not for me, not for these pieces anyway. As well as using the white spirits and wire wool to remove the wax and the paint off the kind of detailed areas, I'm also going to go over the flat areas where I'd already scraped the majority of the paint off, just because there could be traces of wax on those surfaces. The scraper will get the majority of wax off, but just to be on the safe side, obviously I don't want any adhesion problems down the line, I am just going to go over them, just give them a quick rub over as I'm doing the rest of it, and wipe it away with a rag as I've been doing the other parts. So that's the curved trims taken care of. Now I've got this bit here, which is obviously recessed, and there's a curved bit. I can't get my scraper in there because I'm just going to damage the soft pine. And the best thing that I have found are these. It looks like a toothbrush. It's not. It's actually a hard bristled brush, and they come in a pack with some wire brushes of the same kind of size. But the problem is with wire brushes and pine is that they tend to gouge out the pine, because pine's a very soft wood. So I'm going to give this a go. I'm actually going to dip it in the white spirits and then rub it in there. And yeah, that's lifting it. It might take a couple of passes, and I'm going to have to keep cleaning the bristles out so that I don't put that paint back in the recess. But that's definitely working. So this brush is hard enough to remove the wax and the paint with the help of white spirits, but it's not hard enough to damage the wood, the soft pine underneath. So I just use that for any areas that I couldn't get with the scraper or the wire wool. Oh, I've just splattered white spirits in my hair. Oh, I've only just washed my hair as well. That's annoying. It did take a few passes to get rid of all the paint, because as you can imagine, with it being a recessed area, the paint had kind of pooled in some of the areas, so it was quite thick. And it, like I say, it did take a while to just kind of get rid of all of that glooped up paint in that little trim detail. So the same thing applies to the rest of the detail as well. I just went round and got as much as I could with the wire wool, but then like for the hinges and for the really kind of hard to reach areas, I just used the brush and did exactly the same process. So that took a while, but we're there, and in that time it started to rain. But what do you expect? We are in Britain. However, I'm going to carry on, because the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to wash the bedside. Now I'm washing it at this stage because I've just used white spirits, and sometimes white spirits can have like an oily residue on the surface, and if I sanded that now, what can happen is you can drive that residue into the surface of the wood grain, and that can cause issues with your paint sticking to the surface. Those peacocks are so close. That can cause issues with your paint sticking to the surface. So I'm going to clean it now. I'm using, where's it gone? Here. I'm using Dixie Belle's White Lightning Cleaner in an old cleaning bottle, and it's already pre-mixed, but it's a granulated cleaner. You add it into water and it gives you a really strong degreasing, important in this case because we've got some kind of oily residue on the surface, and deglossing cleaner. It does need rinsing, so I'm going to spray this liberally all over the surface, give it a good old rub with a microfiber cloth, rinse my microfiber cloth out, then come back and rinse it, or the rain might rinse it for me. When the peacocks have finished. I'm just standing inside because it's raining. So as you can see, that's been cleaned, rinsed, and it's still outside. I'm going to bring it in to dry in a second. But as you can see, the back is still painted. There's also some little bits of blue on the top. That's the top that didn't strip particularly well, so the blue is really on there, but I'll get a load of that when I'm sanding. So I obviously need to still sand these. The reason I haven't stripped the back, and that is the back of the second bedside as well, because obviously there's a matching pair. The reason I haven't stripped the back in the same way as the rest of them is because it's gone straight over the top of raw wood. So you saw how easy it was to remove the paint off the waxed finish. This on the back hasn't been waxed. It's gone straight over the top of raw wood, so the paint has clung to the surface. I don't need to remove all of that blue on the back because number one, the adhesion is good. Number two, I'm going to be painting straight over the top of it anyway. So I'm just going to need to make sure it's smooth, there's no drips or texture in it or anything like that, so I can get that when I'm sanding, which is the next thing I'm going to do. But I need to move them both inside, let them dry thoroughly, because you can't sand wet wood. So these are all dry, and there is actually one thing I need to do before I sand, and that is fill the crack along here, or the split along here. Now, like I said, it doesn't go around the sides or anything. I've actually had it before where drawers have been split completely and they've been bodged very badly and then painted over the top of. So this is another reason why I don't buy previously painted stuff, because you never know what hides underneath. It's not always just wood, it could be a really bad repair under there. So luckily this has not affected the structure of the drawer. It's literally just a split across the front here, and it's quite deep here. There's no point me sanding them first and then filling it and then having to sand again. I may as well just fill it and then sand them when the filler's all dry and get them nice and smooth. So for anything that is really deep, I use a wood filler. For light cosmetic kind of dints or smaller scratches, I use Dixie Mud, but this is a pretty decent wood filler. If it's something that is like the corner of a piece, say for example this kind of corner had broken off, or there was a big old chunk that was missing, then I use a 2-part wood filler because it is a lot more heavy duty. This is going to be absolutely fine because it is just a split across the front here, so it's not too big. So I'm just going to put this on. This is stainable paintable, it dries really quickly, so this is what I use. I get it off Amazon, but I also use whatever's on offer, basically. I'm not loyal to one particular wood filler. It's just that I like a ready mixed option just for small jobs like this, and then the 2-part filler, which is the one that you have to mix yourself. That's a little bit whiffy, and I don't use it very often, only if there's something big that needs like a chunk refilling. As you can see, I'm all about using the correct PPE here, so if you are going to use wood filler with your finger, probably put a pair of gloves on, or use a spatula. That would probably make more sense, but no, I'm just using my finger. Also, this would be the time now to fill hardware holes if you're going to change handles. I think I'm going to keep handles in the same kind of format as before, so just a single round knob on these, because I think they really suit this kind of piece. So I'm not going to fill a hole in this case, but if you were going to change the handles, this would be the time to fill those holes. So this drawer that's had the filler on it, I'm just going to set to one side because I can actually sand the rest of it, and then I'll just come back to this once the filler's completely dry. So as you can see on the top of this, there's still a bit of blue paint, and that's because the wax on the top had been stripped before the person had painted it. There was areas where there was no wax, and that has clung onto the paint better than the areas that were waxed. Obviously you saw me taking it off, but a sand should get rid of that. Now, I am repainting these, so this doesn't actually have to be completely blue paint free. What it does need to be is smooth. So I don't want obviously any ridges or any bumps where I've used my scraper and my wire wool. I want to make it nice and smooth. But if there's any little bits of blue that are really on there, that's not going to matter at all. If you wanted to take these all the way back to wood because you wanted to keep the wood grain, then you would just keep sanding until all of the blue paint had gone, because these are solid. So that is the beauty of solid wood. You can keep sanding them a little bit more than something that was perhaps a veneer. So I just used my electric sander to smooth them down, make sure they're all nice and smooth. And if you wanted any more information on the sander that I'm using, I'll link a video top right now that explains a little bit more about it, because I get asked all the time. You remember me saying the backs were painted as well? Now, this was painted over the top of raw wood. The backs were not waxed, so the paint has really gripped on there. It is not coming off. Obviously, if you didn't want them painted, you could strip them, but I'm just going to repaint them over the top of this blue. So I'm just going to quickly sand them, make sure they're nice and smooth, because there is a little bit of texture in the paint. I can feel a little bit of like gritty bits, probably where it hasn't been sanded, but I'm just going to give them a real quick once over with my sander to make sure it's nice and smooth, and this will be absolutely fine to paint over the top of. So if you do inherit a piece that is already painted and you're pretty sure that the paint has adhered well to the surface, so it's likely that prep work has been done, then you are absolutely fine to scuff sand and paint over the top of it. There's absolutely no need to strip paint off. The only time that I'd do that is if it was, like I say, the finish was compromised, or if the paint was coming off really easily, like it was on the rest of these bedsides, for example. It just so happened that the back was raw wood and the paint had really gripped onto it, so didn't need to strip it off the back. I also sanded smooth the drawer front with the filler on. And I'm going to leave it there this week. So this video I'm going to split into two. This part has obviously been the stripping of the painted finish, and then the next part will be the repainting, how I want to do it. So hopefully this video has been helpful in showing you a couple of different ways that you can remove something that already has paint on it. Not every technique worked for me, but that is just part and parcel of working with second-hand furniture. It depends on the wood, the finish, the paint that somebody's used, lots and lots of different factors. So hopefully it was helpful anyway. As always, if you've got any questions about paint stripping, drop them in the comments and I'll do my best to answer them. And hopefully I'll catch you next time for part 2.